All right, guys, ancient history. So continuing our discussion of Christianity, there's a quiz on the Google Classroom that posted that we didn't really have time to take in class. So a couple of people have seen that. You're welcome to take that. That's over those sections that we studied with the Roman Empire and Christianity. That's um, chapter what is that? Chapter 11, section 1, I think. No, chapter 11, section 2, which was that Christianity stuff going on there. So we're going to skip ahead to the Middle Ages to what happens after the fall of the Roman Empire in Europe. So looking at this map here, this is medieval Europe in AD 500, and this is really important for Christian history. A lot of stuff going on, and this is really where we see the Roman Empire has fallen, but the Christian part of the Roman Empire is what sticks. And so even though all this area here used to be part of the Roman Empire, it's now broken up into different kingdoms. You've got all these Germanic tribes that came in from what the Romans called Germania, what we would call Germany, came in and invaded and took over all of this western part of the Roman Empire. Keeping in mind the eastern part of the Roman Empire, Constantine's city, Constantinople, is still here. The Eastern Roman Empire is still going to go strong for another 1,000 years, but it's also Christian, very strongly Christian as well. So as we go through the Middle Ages, again, this is 500. We get different tribes from Germany moving in and establishing kingdoms all over the place. We've got the Scots, the Saxons, the Angles, the Britons. In England, we've got the Kingdom of the Franks, which becomes France later on. The Visigoths, a Germanic tribe, in what we would call Spain. The Ostrogoths, a Germanic tribe, takes over Italy. All kinds of stuff. The Vandals, even taking over Africa and some of the islands in the Mediterranean here. So a lot going on here for the Middle Ages with these different kingdoms. And we can see, if we look at a map today of Europe, this is what Europe looks like today. These kingdoms survive. A lot of them survive, and now different ones are taken over in different areas. The Vandals kingdom is taken over eventually by the Muslims coming out of Saudi Arabia. Here, Italy kind of regains itself and becomes independent again of the Germans. But these German tribes kind of carve up different areas of Western Europe, and so we get all these different countries today that are based off of these kind of Middle Ages things right after the fall of the Roman Empire. So even though we're talking 1,500 years ago, this is still some really important stuff today with kind of understanding the world, how the world works. So 4 sections in this one. It's not letting me zoom out. Oh, I gotta click. So 4 sections in this one to look at. The first section here. Let me go full screen. I don't know what that does to your screen. Let me take that out just to make sure. So the first. Can still zoom in. Sorry, I'm still trying to figure all this stuff out. So the first section here, just an overview of medieval Europe. What medieval means. It's Latin for middle. The Germans seizing these kingdoms. It was a really violent time. A lot of conflict between these Germanic tribes. After the fall of the Roman Empire. And then we start to see life is really, really changing, except for Christianity. And the Christians are the ones that are really able to convert a lot of the followers, a lot of the kings, the rulers. Clovis, a very famous one, becomes king of the Franks, and he converts to Christianity, which leads to lots of his followers converting to Christianity after he takes over these areas. So Christianity really starts to spread into Northern Europe at this point and become the dominant religion of the Middle Ages in Europe. Next section to look at here, 1.2. This is all chapter 9 or chapter 21. I'm sorry, unit 9, chapter 21. Is Charlemagne. Charlemagne is the Holy Roman Emperor, and he is a Christian warrior who conquers a lot of the central part of Europe. And actually, the Pope crowns him Roman Emperor, and so and you can see that here. This very famous painting of Charlemagne being crowned by the Pope, and this was a big deal. The Europeans thought that this was a return to the glories of the Roman Empire, which they thought was this amazing thing, and to bring that back was a really powerful moment. And Charlemagne died in 814 AD, so this is about 300 years after the fall of Rome. So this would be like calling a new general a new George Washington or something like that to us, about 300 years or so after George Washington was alive. So, the Roman Empire is trying to make a comeback here, but it's a very Christian emperor. I mean, the Pope is crowning the emperor. And so the Pope, of course, is the head of the Catholic Church, of the Western Church at this point. So, lots going on here. You can read about Charlemagne here and see some of that kind of stuff. A really famous figure in Middle Ages Europe. Now, if we go to our next section here, 1.3, this is really interesting. Just some archaeological evidence. A guy with a metal detector out in a field in Staffordshire, which is today like a state in England, found a hoard, like a treasure hoard, of military items and a few other things left by the Saxons, these Germanic tribes that came into England and took over after the Romans lost that territory. So get a real good chance to see kind of what they had, what they believe. If you want to read this, you can see this treasure hoard and why it was placed there. They think has something to do with elves firing darts. And so at people. So if you're interested in elves and darts and magic and some of that kind of stuff, this section 1.3 will be interesting read for you. Okay, and the last section here, this is really important, especially to keep in mind. We looked at this a little bit with our India, but this is the feudal system, and so this is the system that comes into play in England. I'm sorry, not in England, in Europe during the Middle Ages. And so after Charlemagne's death, this is how the kings have power, and this is how the kings control their territories, is with this feudal system. And so, like we talked about with the caste system, it's similar, but there's some key differences. The caste system, remember, the kings are the second rung, and the church officials, the Brahmins, in India are the top. Well, in Europe, it was the other way around. The kings were on top. The kings inherited their position, but none could rule without the support of the noblemen. And so they need these noble people and the church officials to support the kings. So the kings are kind of held hostage by the nobility and the church leaders. And so they're all kind of working together, but the king technically has the most power. Now, the nobility and the church rule through the knights. And so the knights would guard their noble's castle, and they would fight for them. And then if the king went to war with another kingdom, they could call in their nobles, who would bring all their knights. And then, all these nobles would bring all these knights. And then it would be, that would constitute the army. going forth. And eventually the church officials start to get wise to this, and they start to have their own knights. And so that's where you get things like the Knights Templar and the Knights, the Hospitaller Knights. And so we start to see different church orders kind of emulating this idea. And so we see these warrior monks in Europe that's going to lead to the Crusades eventually, which we'll talk about here later this week. And then, of course, the bottom of the rung is everybody else. And it's shaped like a pyramid because this is what most people, where the most people are. And so the bottom of this would be, 90% of the population, 9 out of every 10 people in Middle Ages Europe would be a peasant or a serf. And so this is all kinds of jobs, even skilled jobs like blacksmith, even just, some soldiers, basic soldiers, but it's farmers, it's real basic salt of the earth type people that we're talking about here. And this is what most people did, but they depended on the knights for protection. And in exchange for protection, they would do the jobs and grow the food so that everybody above them could eat and have some of those basics. So, this group is obviously the most important because it's holding these other groups up, even though these guys are more famous and get more press. So. Anyway, just kind of like the grocery store workers today, we're finding out how important grocery store workers are right now during this crisis, so that they can stock our toilet paper and make sure we're well fed and have all the stuff we need. So, what I would like for you to do, and again, nothing's an official assignment, but if you're home, if you're bored, we're not going to have time to cover this if we come back to school at the end of April. So if you want to learn about some of this stuff, it's really, really interesting. Read chapter 21, section 1, which is 1.1 through 1.4, and I'll put all this in the Google Classroom, and then answer those questions right there. And then you can do that in a Google Doc and turn it in, and you can show off that you did it, and we can chat about it and do some of that kind of stuff. So planning on doing the next one. I'm almost to my 15-minute time limit here. But the next one, we're going to do chapter 21, section 2, at least a little bit. We can even talk about the bubonic plague, which is a little bit... we're going to do section 2. We're going to do the church and the crown and some of that kind of stuff, and look at the Crusades a little bit and some of the infighting with the Christian stuff, and then maybe look at Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation, because that's a big deal, especially in this area with so many Christians being Protestant. So we'll see some of that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's what we got going. Thanks for watching. Good luck with your reading. Send me a message if you have any questions or anything, and then we'll do that this week, and then I'll post the link to the What is Christianity video, and you guys can finish filling that part of your chart in. All right. Awesome. Hope you guys are doing well. Talk to you later.